Welcome, everyone. I'm going to provide a little bit of background on the Fortunoff Video Archive, the work we do, and try and give you all some insight into the exhibit and the motivations behind it. I won't be diving too deep into the actual content of the exhibit. I'm hoping that many of you will have an opportunity, if you haven't already, to see the exhibit yourselves at the Beinecke. But I wanted to sort of share, I guess, a sort of behind the scenes version of why we're doing this exhibit and what the main purpose of it is. But let's start with a little bit of background. I've had the privilege of working with this exhibit, and this collection on and off since 2003, as Mike mentioned. And I've learned a lot about testimony and the individuals who give testimony. And one of the most important things I've learned is that survivors, and this again, of course, is a really part of the inspiration for how we put this exhibit together, is that survivors are not some sort of monolithic, homogenous group, but really a diverse collection of unique human beings and all their wonder and all their flaws, just like you and me, who had rich and singular lives and who have very different interpretations of the past and the present, have very different religious and political beliefs that vary dramatically. And so I make an effort, and this exhibit makes an effort, not to generalize about survivors. And we certainly don't, we would find it hubris to really speak in their name. So I don't speak for survivors. I'm not some sort of official representative of the survivor community. It's my job as a director of this archive to try my best to allow survivors to speak for themselves and to provide an opportunity for us to listen. And that's exactly what this archive's mission is and what the exhibit aims to do. So, but sadly, today, I think that's going to be difficult to do. It's hard to stream and show video on Zoom, I find. So we're not really going to watch any excerpts of testimony today, but rather I'll try and give you a little bit of a backstory, and then we can open it up for a Q&A as time allows. So just a little bit of background for those of you who don't know much about the archive or the sort of community of survivors in New Haven. But in 1977, after about 10 years of work, there were a group of survivors and children of survivors and like-minded activists in the New Haven community that built a monument to their families murdered by the Nazi regime and their collaborators during the Holocaust. If you haven't seen this monument, it's not far from campus. It's on Whaley Avenue, and it is one of, if not the first, Holocaust memorial built on public land in the United States. There were other private memorials at cemeteries and synagogues, but really this was the first time that the mayor of a town put aside a piece of public land specifically for the construction of a Holocaust memorial. And so in this sense, New Haven really proved to be, again, a model city. This structure is a testament to the resilience and the ingenuity and the sheer organizational tenacity of a collective of Holocaust survivors in New Haven. Their resolve, their determination to commemorate and document what had been taken from them in the Holocaust, their families and their communities, is really astounding, and a clear reminder that the Holocaust as a historical event is not something that's so far removed from us in space and time, but rather also a part of New Haven history as well, since this remarkable group of survivors in New Haven were our neighbors. And this monument was built here. And so everything about this monument also in some form applies to the Fortunoff Video Archive. And in fact, many of the survivors who helped organize and raise the funds necessary for the construction of that memorial would become the leaders, volunteers, and participants in the organization, the grassroots local nonprofit called the Holocaust Survivors Film Project, which is the direct predecessor of the Fortunoff Video Archive, and which again is in part celebrating its 45th anniversary. So the Holocaust Survivors Film Project began taping survivors on videotape here in New Haven in May of 1979. And so this grassroots project of survivors for survivors that has grown into an internationally renowned collection that has transformed the manner in which we think, research, write, and teach about the Holocaust. And from its beginnings, its humble beginnings here in New Haven, The collection now contains more than 4,500 testimonies of survivors and witnesses of the Holocaust, recorded in more than 12 different languages, in more than just as many countries, with cooperative affiliated projects worldwide. And there are testimonies of Jewish victims, but also testimonies of non-Jewish victims of Nazi persecution, including Sinti and Roma, members of the resistance, liberators, individuals who worked in the displaced persons camps after the war. So it's a very broad and also ecumenical collection of testimonies. So while this exhibit, and again, I hope you'll have an opportunity to see it, it focuses on the Jewish experience, it does not do so exclusively. And this collection aims towards a more inclusive understanding of the historical events that we now refer to as the Holocaust. And while it was born in New Haven and from the survivor community here, not Yale, it came to Yale in 1981 and opened its doors to the research community immediately thereafter. And in a sense, represents, I think, a rather incredible example of the cooperative efforts that are possible between the university and the community of New Haven. The archive came to Yale in '81 thanks to Jeffrey Hartman, a distinguished professor of comparative literature who himself fled Frankfurt on a kinder transport for England. And Jeffrey was our faculty advisor until his death in 2016. And he gave testimony, he took testimony, and his wife, most importantly, his wife Renee, a survivor from Bratislava, born in 1933, was also one of the first 4 witnesses recorded in May in 1979 by the Holocaust Survivors Film Project. So really, we are talking 45 years of testimony, and I'll note that we recently recorded, a week ago, we recorded a testimony with our affiliated project in Bratislava. So 45 years of recording. Renee, whose testimony, an excerpt of her testimony is featured in the exhibit, and an edited version of her testimony is also available on our website. I strongly recommend that you take the time to watch that edited program. Renee was born to deaf parents, and her sister Herta, who was 2 years younger than her, was deaf. Renee was hearing, so she was a coda. And in her testimony, she recounts how she served as the ears for her entire family, gathering information and alerting them to danger. And after many twists and turns, Renee and Herta, who were just children, were sent to Bergen-Belsen, and they survived together. Renee was just 11 years old, and she's still here today. And in fact, she was one of the last of the first 4 survivors recorded in May 1979, still with us. And we had the pleasure of seeing her last week when she read a poem at our official opening event. Renee's sister, Herta, passed away in 2021. And that, I believe, is also a key answer to the question of why this archive is doing this exhibit, and why this archive is more important than ever. Survivors are passing away every day, and we're approaching really the end of the era where we can reliably engage with living witnesses. And with that shift, our archive takes on an even more important role as a repository of their memories, as one of the few bridges that we have that can bridge the gap between the living and the dead. Jeffrey Hartman wrote the following. I'm going to read a quote in 1985, something he wrote about testimonies. Testimonies enable us, I quote, to capture directly the feelings and attitudes of survivors, the entire rather than the segmented perspective of each individual. To say that 6 million were killed or 90% of a particular town remains an abstraction. To hear and see even one of these testimonies is, in contrast, an evidential and searing encounter. As they tell their story, the survivors are not simply victims. Their courage in reliving these painful memories shines through. Their strength communicates itself to us, their resolve that such inhumanity should not happen again. They are bearing witness so that future generations will know what must be known, and in a form that does not degrade the human image. However grim the contents of their own experience, these are people who speak to us directly in their own voice, and who often speak for an entire family that was destroyed, even for an entire community. It's our hope that testimonies like these will open the hearts as well as the minds of future generations of young adults. I would argue that this opening of hearts and minds is exactly what the exhibit aims to do as well. Each generation of these young adults must rededicate itself to listening to the survivors who shared their testimonies with us at great emotional cost. To ensure that this archive doesn't remain inert or shelved in the library, but to invite the New Haven community back into the archive to experience their shared legacy and this piece of New Haven and Yale history. That's the goal of the exhibit. Also, to offer an opportunity for those who are willing to engage in an act of solidarity similar to the one that the archive initially made by recording the testimonies of survivors, who for many years, quite honestly, were ignored or even silenced by the general public. So this exhibit allows you, again, to witness the witness, to listen to have an opportunity to listen to the survivors, many of which will tell you were not listened to in the immediate post-war period. So this exhibit marks the 45th anniversary of the first videotaping of the Holocaust Survivors Film Project, which was this grassroots effort which evolved in the video archive. But in the first person is also the first large-scale public exhibition of footage from this collection ever. There are about 19 video testimonies that are presented in the mezzanines, on the mezzanine floor in vitrines, experience of survivors and witnesses to the atrocities of Nazi Germany and its collaborators. And we can talk a little bit more in the Q&A if there's interest about why some testimonies were chosen over others. It's a very difficult process. But these videos are not the sole part of the exhibit. This exhibit, as Michael mentioned, was co-curated with Constanze Kunst, who is the librarian for Jewish Studies here at Yale. And these video testimonies are embedded in a display of books and pamphlets and manuscripts and documents, and even a few items, including a set of coins from the Lodz Ghetto, that are all taken from across the Yale Library. And the goal here is to present the history of Jewish efforts to document anti-Jewish persecution through eyewitness accounts from the Kishinev Pogrom of 1903 all the way up through the Holocaust and its aftermath. So we embed the Fortunoff Video Archive and the Holocaust Survivors Film Project, which began in '79, in a longue durée history of these efforts, this Jewish tradition or traditions of collecting and recording eyewitness accounts of persecution and anti-Jewish violence. And in doing so, one of the things we want to show is that we want to confront this myth that survivors, and particularly survivors of the Holocaust, were somehow silent about their experience in the immediate post-war period. All of the evidence that's on display clearly contradicts this, but also it places the video archive, or attempts at least to place the video archive in this long-standing tradition, and show that although the video archive was path-breaking in harnessing video technology, it participates in a much longer culture and tradition that stretches all the way back to the biblical commandment to remember, Zachor. So as long as I've been working with this archive, and as long as I've been active in the field of Jewish studies, I've really never seen an exhibition of materials like this. It's not just that we're taking audiovisual testimony from the collection, putting it on display in a scale that we've never done before, and certainly in a scale that the Beinecke's never seen. There's never been an exhibit at Yale that shows as much audiovisual material as this one. But I've never seen an exhibit that tries to connect this belated testimonial work of archives like the Fortunoff Archive in a larger context, documenting crimes committed in the name of Nazi Germany, but also stretching back to eyewitness accounts as far as throughout the 20th century. So these are all novums for the field, at least in terms of exhibitions, and certainly it's all new for Yale. In fact, I can't recall an exhibit at Yale on this scale dedicated to the subject of Jewish history ever. I'm sure someone in the audience will correct me if I'm wrong. And it's not just about Jewish history. This is our history as well, right? I mean, after all, the Holocaust was the greatest crime committed in the 20th century. So in this sense, I I think this is really a new approach to presenting this history at the Beinecke, across Yale University, and probably the Ivy League in general. I can't remember an exhibit of this on this topic at any other institution across the Ivy League. Another novum is the fact that a great deal of the material is presented in more than, I think, 10 different languages, and there's an enormous amount of material in Yiddish. And I can't remember any exhibit in recent history that at Yale University or across the Ivy League that lifts up this many Yiddish sources in an exhibit as well. So there's a lot of innovations and a lot of new novums in this exhibit. So it's very exciting to see it, and we're gratified to have it up for 6 months. So once again, I encourage you all to come and view.